It was a Friday morning in one of Toronto's wealthiest neighborhoods. The luxury home at 50 Old Colony Road had just hit the market, and real estate agent Elise Stern was showing it to prospective buyers. The couple she was touring with made it all the way to the basement pool, a gleaming private spa lined with tile, railings, and a recessed hot tub. But what they saw would shock them forever. There, seated side by side in the corner of the room, were two figures, upright but motionless. Barry Sherman, one of Canada's richest men, and his wife, Honey, both fully clothed, both dead. Leather belts wrapped around their necks, fastened to the railing behind them. In one of the country's safest cities, inside a gated mansion with no sign of forced entry, one of the most influential couples in Canadian history had been brutally killed. And no one had any idea as to who had done it, what their motives were, and how it played out. What followed was a police investigation riddled with delays, wild media speculation, and a grieving family that took matters into their own hands. 8 years later, no one has been charged. Theories abound, but facts remain scarce. And those who knew Barry and Honey Sherman best are still asking the same question. Who wanted them dead? Welcome to Bad Things. Join us as we break down the final days of Barry and Honey Sherman, the theories that have emerged, and, ultimately, what most likely happened. The rise of the Shermans. Barry Sherman was not the kind of billionaire who wore designer suits or gave TED Talks. He was, in many ways, an anomaly, an eccentric scientist turned pharmaceutical mogul who built Apotex, one of Canada's largest drug companies, from the ground up. Born in Toronto in 1942 and orphaned by the age of 10, Barry graduated top of his class at the University of Toronto and earned a PhD in engineering from MIT. In 1974, he founded Apotex Incorporated and quickly disrupted the Canadian pharmaceutical industry by pushing generic drug production to aggressive new heights. By 2017, he was worth an estimated $3 to $4 billion and involved in nearly 100 active lawsuits at any given time. He would sue you if you got in his way, one associate recalled, and he'd keep going until you were broke or gone. His wife, Honey Sherman, was the opposite in many respects. Social, intuitive, warm. The daughter of Holocaust survivors, she was born in a Polish refugee camp and moved to Canada as a child. She and Barry married in 1971. Honey became a fixture in Toronto's charity circuit, sitting on more than a dozen boards and giving away hundreds of millions alongside Barry to hospitals, universities, and Jewish organizations. To the public, they were inseparable, rich, philanthropic, and always present at fundraisers. Their home had hosted Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and their influence stretched from corporate boardrooms to Parliament Hill. But behind the curtain, things were more complex. Apotex was involved in multiple high-stakes lawsuits and investigations, including a dispute with Teva Pharmaceuticals over alleged stolen trade secrets. Barry's extended family, the Winter cousins, were suing him for what they claimed was a denied share of Apotex's founding profits. That case had just been dismissed by a judge in September 2017. The Winters were furious. Barry was, as always, unmoved. By December, Honey had finally convinced her husband to move out of their longtime home. The Shermans had just listed the mansion at 50 Old Colony Road for $6.9 million and were preparing to build a new $30 million estate in Forest Hill. He didn't want to move, one friend recalled, but Honey was the boss on this one. The last week. The Shermans' final week began with subtle irregularities. On Tuesday, December 12th, Honey missed a charity board meeting without notifying anyone. Friends found it strange. When one emailed her to check in, She replied vaguely, dealing with some stuff. No explanation, no follow-up. By Wednesday, December 13th, things seemed normal again. Barry worked all day at Apotex. Honey went shopping for Hanukkah gifts. At 5 p.m., the couple met with their builders in a small boardroom at Apotex to finalize plans for their future home. They seemed in good spirits, one contractor later told police. But Barry made an unusual comment. He said he planned to head home early, an anomaly for a man who routinely worked until 11 p.m. At 6:15 p.m., Honey left Apotex and drove her Lexus SUV to Bayview Village Mall. Security footage showed her shopping briefly before returning home around 8 p.m. That would be the last confirmed sighting of her alive. Barry remained at the office a bit longer. At 8:30 p.m., he sent his final email, an internal message to an Apotex employee about production delays at a plant in India. After that, silence. No more emails, no calls. For a man known to fire off messages at all hours, it was striking. Investigators believe the Shermans were killed sometime later that night. Friday morning. Friday, December 15th, 2017 began as routine. The Shermans' housekeeper and gardener arrived at the property. The alarm system was off. The kitchen was quiet. Barry was nowhere to be found. By mid-morning, real estate agent Elise Stern arrived for a scheduled showing. She had been told the Shermans might be away. Honey had mentioned going to Florida. Barry was expected at work. Stern entered using a lockbox key. The tour went room by room. Bedrooms, sauna, tennis court, and then the pool. At the far side of the basement spa, seated against the railing, were Barry and Honey, dressed in winter coats, leather belts looped around their necks, fastened to the horizontal bars of the pool railing. Barry was upright, one leg crossed over the other. Honey was slightly slumped, a visible bruise on her face. It looked posed, Stern later told police. One of the prospective buyers described it as almost like a yoga position. The pool water was undisturbed. Nothing was out of place, and yet everything was wrong. The crime scene. Paramedics arrived and quickly confirmed both Shermans were dead. Rigor mortis had already set in. The working estimate was that they had died roughly 36 to 48 hours earlier, pointing to Wednesday night. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no smashed locks. A basement door was unlocked and a window had been left open to ventilate fumes from recent painting. These were standard practices for the Shermans, not anomalies. No valuables were missing. No fingerprints or DNA stood out. The home had no working security cameras. Barry had refused to install any. He said if someone wanted to get him, they would, a friend told web sleuths. He just didn't care. The official autopsy confirmed death by ligature neck compression, strangulation with a binding. A second privately commissioned autopsy found signs that both victims had been restrained, possibly with zip ties. Honey had injuries consistent with being moved after death, suggesting she was killed in another room and dragged downstairs. Still, on the day of discovery, Toronto police issued only a cautious statement. The deaths were suspicious. They did not immediately call it murder. A family in shock. By Saturday, December 16th, the media were already speculating. Several outlets, citing unnamed police sources, floated the idea of a murder-suicide, that Barry might have killed Honey and then ended his own life. The Sherman children were outraged. In a statement released December 17th, they called the rumors irresponsible and unfounded, and said the family was shocked that such a theory would be circulated without evidence. The idea that our father could have done this is absurd, Jonathan Sherman later told CBS. We want the truth, not fiction. Family friend and businessman Frank D'Angelo echoed the sentiment. Anyone who knew Barry and Honey knew they would never hurt each other. That theory should never have made it into the public conversation. With confidence in the police waning, the family hired Brian Greenspan, a high-profile Toronto lawyer, to assemble an independent team of investigators. They included retired homicide detectives, forensic pathologists, and crime scene experts. The private team conducted its own autopsy and forensic analysis and quickly concluded what the police had not yet said publicly. This was a double homicide. The shift. On January 26, 2018, 6 weeks after the bodies were found, Detective Susan Gomes made it official. We believe Barry and Honey Sherman were targeted and deliberately murdered. The investigation continued for years. Dozens of warrants, hundreds of interviews, no arrests. Then, in December 2021, police released a short surveillance video showing a mysterious figure walking outside the Sherman home on the night of the murders. The person's face was obscured. They had a distinctive gait, dragging one foot slightly behind. Police called them a person of interest. The public did not recognize them. No ID was ever made. In 2022, another revelation emerged. Cameras from a house across the street, vacant at the time, captured 4 unidentified individuals loitering outside the home next door to the Shermans on the night of December 13th. They arrived in 2 vehicles, moved in and out of view, and lingered for nearly an hour. One car left at 7:09 p.m. The other slipped away unseen. The people in that footage have never been identified, and they have never come forward. By 2023, no arrests had been made. The family offered a $35 million reward for information. Still silence. As of 2025, the murders of Barry and Honey Sherman remain unsolved. This was the first theory to make headlines and also the one most quickly discredited. In the days immediately following the discovery of the bodies, some police sources reportedly told journalists that investigators were looking into the possibility that Barry Sherman had killed Honey, then taken his own life. The Toronto Star and ABC both published early reports suggesting this line of inquiry. At first glance, the idea had surface logic. There were no signs of forced entry, no murder weapon, and both bodies were found in a staged but otherwise undisturbed scene. Statistically, in domestic killings involving older couples, the husband is often the perpetrator. But this theory was met with immediate outrage from the Sherman family. "It made no sense," said Jonathan Sherman. "My parents were making plans. They were excited about the new house. They were going to Florida. This wasn't some desperate end." Their lawyer, Brian Greenspan, was more blunt. "There is no factual basis whatsoever for that theory. It should never have been floated," he said in an interview with CBC. The privately commissioned autopsy also cast doubt. It revealed signs that both Barry and Honey had been restrained, which would have been physically impossible if Barry was acting alone and then intended to end his own life afterward. Dr. Calvin Diesel, the forensic expert hired by the family, said, "This was not one person acting alone. It simply doesn't hold up biomechanically." Despite this, the damage was done. The murder-suicide narrative dominated headlines for nearly a week, shaping public perception and, critics argue, slowing down the homicide investigation. Toronto police officially ruled out this theory on January 26, 2018. Still, it remains an example of how early assumptions, when leaked to the press, can derail public understanding of a case before facts have settled. Theory 2. A professional contract killing. One of the most widely accepted possibilities is that Barry and Honey Sherman were murdered by professional killers hired by a third party. Supporters of this theory point to the nature of the crime. No forced entry, No theft, no evidence of a struggle beyond Honey's facial injuries. Both victims were neatly posed, with belts looped around their necks and secured to the pool railing. This, some argue, shows not only planning, but calculated staging. "I've seen messy murders," said one retired homicide detective quoted in Maclaren's. This wasn't that. This was clinical, efficient. Barry's long list of business enemies and lawsuits only fuels the theory. Investigative journalist Kevin Donovan noted, "There were companies in the pharmaceutical world that hated Barry Sherman deeply. This was a man who made enemies on a global scale. Some believe the killing may have been retaliation for a lawsuit or business deal gone bad. Others think it could have been a form of intimidation, especially given the theatrical pose of the bodies. Still, police have never confirmed whether they believe the killer was paid. And as one journalist pointed out, professional killers usually don't leave scenes that scream murder. They want it to look like something else. In this case, the staged nature of the deaths was too obvious, which raises questions. Were the killers trying to send a message, or were they amateurs trying to look professional? So far, no known individual from Barry's corporate world has been publicly named as a suspect. Theory 3. The Winter Cousins. A family revenge plot. Another theory centers on the deeply fractured relationship between Barry Sherman and his extended family, specifically the Winter Cousins. For over a decade, Barry had been embroiled in a legal war with Kerry Winter and his brothers. They alleged that Barry had cut them out of Apotex's founding profits, a claim the court dismissed just months before the murders. Kerry Winter's behavior after the deaths raised immediate red flags. In a televised interview with CBC's The Fifth Estate, he stated bluntly, "I was betrayed. My cousin hurt me, and now I want to hurt him." He added, "I used to fantasize about killing Barry, just decapitating him, rolling his head down the parking lot." Winter also admitted he had no alibi for the night of December 13th, saying, "I could have driven over and done it. I didn't, but I could have." During the same interview, he claimed Barry had once asked him to kill Honey Sherman in the 1990s, a claim for which he later failed a polygraph test. The Sherman family called Kerry's remarks disgusting and baseless, but police did question him. He has never been publicly named as a suspect, but remains a person of interest in the eyes of many. The core of this theory suggests that Kerry Winter, or someone acting on behalf of the cousins, hired professionals to carry out the killings, possibly as revenge or out of bitterness over the lawsuit. Still, critics point out that the Winter cousins were not especially wealthy or connected. Staging an elaborate hit would require resources, planning, and criminal connections they have not been shown to possess. Then again, as Kerry himself said, "I probably had reason to lash out, but I didn't." Whether that's true remains an open question. Theory 4. Internal conflict within the immediate family. A more controversial theory suggests that someone within the Sherman household, possibly one of their children, may have played a role, either directly or indirectly. This theory gained traction after Alexandra Sherman, the couple's eldest daughter, reportedly accused her brother Jonathan of being involved. The accusation surfaced in court filings and was later confirmed by Jonathan in interviews, saying, "We no longer speak. She believes I had something to do with it. It's completely false." Jonathan had taken an active role in the investigation, even hiring a third-party reviewer in 2021 to analyze the case independently. His sisters reportedly opposed this, fearing it could complicate the police work. Some speculate that financial motivations or internal disputes could have escalated to violence, but there is no known evidence linking any of the Sherman children to the crime. All four siblings stood united in their initial call for a homicide investigation, and as beneficiaries of their parents' vast estate, they were already poised to inherit billions. Toronto police have never indicated that any of the children are suspects. As one legal analyst put it, in cases like this, people want a neat internal motive, but suspicion is not evidence. Families fracture under grief. Theory 5. A random break-in or botched robbery. This theory is the simplest on its face, and also the one most widely rejected by investigators. Could the Shermans have interrupted a burglar who panicked and killed them? Police say no. There were no signs of forced entry. Nothing of value was missing. Honey's jewelry was still on. The house wasn't ransacked. And it's highly unlikely that a panicked thief would pose two bodies in matching belts against a pool railing. Still, some argue that a petty criminal might have entered the home, perhaps via the unlocked basement door or open window, and escalated things unexpectedly. If that person had a background in violence or mental illness, the result could have been chaos. But nearly every official source has ruled this out. The evidence, they say, points to planning, not panic. Theory 6. A betrayal from inside the circle. A final theory suggests the killer was someone known to the Shermans, either a friend, associate, or employee, who used that trust to gain access to the house. This person may have had intimate knowledge of the home's layout, the couple's schedule, and their lack of security systems. They may have even had a key. This theory doesn't suggest a random stranger or organized crime. Instead, it posits a trusted insider who either had a grievance or was paid off by a third party. It's not inconceivable that someone rang the bell and was let in. No questions asked. Still, most household staff and known associates were cleared or had alibis. The real estate agents were vetted, contractors had moved on, and friends were in other cities. There is no known suspect in this category, but investigators have said they believe the Shermans were targeted, not chosen at random. This leaves open the possibility that the killer was familiar, even friendly, with the victims. After years of stalled leads, speculative reporting, and contradictory statements, one theory emerges as the most logical, plausible, and consistent with the known evidence. Barry and Honey Sherman were victims of a premeditated, targeted double homicide carried out by professional killers at the behest of someone with a personal vendetta or financial motive. This was not an impulsive act. It wasn't a burglary gone wrong, nor a family fight that spiraled out of control. It was a planned operation. Silent, fast, and staged to confuse. And it was likely commissioned by someone who wanted Barry Sherman dead for very specific reasons. Let's walk through the reasoning behind this conclusion. Motive: resentment, revenge, and loss. Over the course of his life, Barry Sherman accumulated not only massive wealth, but also a staggering list of adversaries due to his litigation tactics. As Kevin Donovan put it, there were many people who didn't just dislike Barry Sherman, they hated him, and he knew that. Whether it was business rivals, his cousins, the Winter family, or any number of people Barry had sued, the list of enemies he had built was enormous. They had financial motives, personal hatred towards Barry, or future business plans he'd stand in the way of. In short, Barry Sherman was a problem that wouldn't go away to so many. Means: silent, sophisticated, and staged. The cause of death, ligature strangulation, is highly significant. It's a close contact, deliberate method that requires time and control. It is also silent. No neighbors heard anything. No alarm was triggered. No gunshots. No screams. The first autopsy stated the cause as ligature neck compression, but it was the second privately ordered autopsy that told the more disturbing story. Both Barry and Honey had wrist markings, suggesting they were bound. Honey had additional injuries, including facial bruising and signs she may have been dragged post-mortem. That implies a multi-stage operation: restraint, execution, and body staging. The belts used to affix the victims to the pool railing may or may not have been theirs. It's possible the killers brought their own. But the use of household objects fits a known professional tactic. Avoid bringing traceable murder weapons. The posing was also deliberate. Barry's leg was crossed. Honey lay awkwardly beside him. Both were in winter coats. One real estate agent described the scene as almost meditative, but to forensic experts, it was clearly staged. And this may be the most telling detail. Nothing else in the house was disturbed. No overturned furniture. No signs of a struggle in the pool room. Either the victims were compliant or overwhelmed so quickly that resistance was impossible. That strongly points to multiple perpetrators. Two people can subdue two elderly adults quickly. One person would have to isolate and restrain them individually. Risky and logistically difficult. The level of coordination does not look like a spontaneous crime. It looks like a plan. Opportunity. A perfect storm of vulnerabilities. In many ways, December 13th, 2017 presented the perfect window for this kind of attack. The Shermans were preparing to leave town. The house was listed for sale. Strangers were coming and going. The alarm system was off. A window was open for ventilation. A basement door was unlocked. There were no security cameras. Barry had famously refused to install any. If they're going to get you, he once said, they're going to get you. That fatalism left the door, literally and metaphorically, wide open. Based on timing reconstructed from security footage and email logs, Honey Sherman arrived home around 8 p.m. Barry sent his last email at 8:30 p.m. After that, nothing. That silence likely coincides with the murders. One plausible sequence. Honey returns home first. She is ambushed, possibly in the garage, hallway, or another entry point. She's attacked or restrained. She may have fought back, given her facial injuries. She's either killed immediately or subdued. Barry arrives soon after. He walks into a scene already in motion, his wife missing or tied up. He is restrained quickly, perhaps at gunpoint. Once both are incapacitated, the killers carry out the executions. Then they stage the bodies at the pool, either as a distraction tactic or a message. They leave, possibly via the basement door. The Walking Man, a ghost in the snow. In December 2021, police released footage of a mysterious figure walking along Old Colony Road on the night of the murders. The person's face is hidden. Their gait is odd. One leg kicks out as they walk. Detective Brandon Price said, "This individual spent an extremely suspicious amount of time in the area. We have not been able to identify them. No other individual caught on neighborhood surveillance has remained unidentified. This figure is the exception. Whether they were a lookout, a participant, or just an unfortunate coincidence remains unclear. But the fact that no one came forward suggests the person knew not to." Conclusion. The least assumptions, the most logic. By applying Occam's razor, the most likely explanation is also the simplest. Barry and Honey Sherman were murdered by professionals, hired by someone who had a deep personal motive, and the resources to carry it out without leaving a trace. The Winter cousins? Possibly. A disgruntled business associate? Also possible. What matters more than who is how, and how cleanly it was done. The killer knew when the Shermans would be home, knew how to get in quietly, knew how to kill silently, and knew how to get out before anyone noticed. They also knew how to leave nothing behind. As of 2025, the case remains officially open with no arrests. But to those who followed it closely, the outlines are clear. This was a targeted execution, planned, paid for, and still protected by silence. As Jonathan Sherman said, "Closure will not be possible until those responsible for this evil act are brought to justice." Until then, the quiet mansion at 50 Old Colony Road remains not just a crime scene, but a symbol that wealth, influence, and good deeds cannot always shield you from old grudges, and that sometimes the people who want you gone wait until they know they'll get away with it.